Welcome to the Thrive podcast with the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church.
How does your faith kind of play into it, or does it play into it?
What can be done about it? When I say the church, I'm talking about evangelical white Christians and the black folk who attend their churches. Hello, welcome to the Thrive podcast with the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. I'm Fred Jeff Smith, pastor of Shiloh, and I'm very happy that you chose to either view this on Facebook or YouTube or listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, or Amazon. We're grateful for your presence with us. As always, we invite your input. You can reach out to me at fredjeffsmith@gmail.com, fredjeffsmith@gmail.com, and let us know how we're doing and what we can do to make this podcast better for you. I am very grateful and very excited today to have with me Mrs. Ashley Kennedy Shelton, who is the director of the Power Coalition of Louisiana. Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time to come and share with us today.
I'm so excited to be here. It's a long time coming, so lots to talk about.
Start by introducing to the audience what the Power Coalition exactly is. I know it's a public advocacy group, but let them know what Power Coalition is.
Yep, Power Coalition came out of, my background's in philanthropy, so Baton Rouge Area Foundation. I did a ton of work after Katrina. And Power Coalition was actually born out of the reality that I had money and proximity to people with power. We had $50 million from the Bush Clinton Katrina funds. I had access to presidents. I had, our chair at the time was, Ambassador James Joseph, who was the ambassador during the, breakup of apartheid. So lots of, power adjacent, I call it. And, but the money wasn't getting down to the people. And so the 50 million was dwarfed by the federal 50 billion. And our people were still hurting. Houses weren't being rebuilt. Neighborhoods, still devastated and destroyed. And it occurred to me that even with all the resources and relationships in the world, we weren't changing things at scale. And Power Coalition came out of the idea that we had a beautiful car and no engine, and that the people are the engine. Yeah. And so Power Coalition is about building pathways to power for Black and other people of color in this state, and understanding truly what power means. And so power means having your voice heard, being able to elect candidates of choice, actually shifting politics to a place where we have elected officials that do the work of the people, and that if they don't, there are repercussions, and that this isn't just about political machines. This is about people. And I tell folks all the time, voting is a social determinant of health, and in every way. We learned through COVID, they're deciding whether you're safe at home, safe at work, safe at school. They're determining what you have access to, when you can go to work, when you can't go. All of these things, right? They're deciding if you deserve to be whole on the other side of a pandemic. And, and so we think that it taught folks a lot about how important politics actually, how important it is to their lives. And it also taught them that we can't ignore it anymore. We can't pretend like it's, I don't do politics. Well, our existence is political. Sure. So, and so Power Coalition does two things. There are two sides to the shop. We spend half the year listening deeply to community, and so we go all over the state with listening sessions. And then, we build an agenda out of that. So hearing what people need, hearing what people's issues are. We do a lot of policy work, in the spring. And so we actually take that agenda and really move policy for folks and work with community to have their voices heard at the local and the state level. And then in the fall, we start what we call GOTV, Get Out the Vote. And what's important about that is just connecting people to their vote. One of the things I'm really proud of about what Power Coalition has done, when we pick when we create a universe of folks that we're going to reach out to, we usually reach out to infrequent voters, Black voters, other voters of color, meaning that they don't always vote, they're not consistent voters, or they vote for the president, don't vote otherwise. And we really talk to them about reconnecting them to their vote and walking in their agency as a voter, that it only is broken if we don't participate. If we participate and force folks to engage and be really true to what they said they were going to do when they got into office, that we can actually move some things. And I think the combination of both community being engaged at a different level and then being able to understand how it works, that we've been able to win a lot at the legislature, whether it's criminal justice reform. We've expanded voting rights for the last 2 years in this deep South, where the rest of the country went the other way. And, and of our universe, 65% of our universe votes. If I talk to them, I know that they will go out and vote. And so what that tells me, too, is that nobody's talking to black voters. Nobody's talking to black voters, Latino voters, Vietnamese voters, API, nobody's talking to us. And so, this is about reconnecting people to their agency as a voter.
Let's talk a little bit about that and educate me a little bit, because I'm going to push back a little bit. I believe in voting rights. I believe in voting. I don't miss an election. I don't care if it's for dog catcher or for president of the United States. I'm going to make it a point to vote, and I encourage other people to vote as well. But to borrow a term from my conservative friends, voting these days seems to be rigged in many ways, primarily through this whole process of redistricting and gerrymandered districts. Tell me why I should continue to vote and advocate others to vote for district elections. I'm not talking statewide, but for district elections where the districts are so inappropriately drawn so as to nullify my vote. I had Luke Mixon in here yesterday, and I brought up to him that in redistricting, we were 0 for 4. We lost on congressional redistricting. We lost on state legislative redistricting. We lost on Metro Council redistricting, and we lost on school board redistricting. And these things are going to eventually be settled in the courts, but the way the courts are these days, I don't think that that's going to go our way. So when I'm voting in a district where I'm only 12%, 15%, maybe 20% of the electorate, and my vote just doesn't seem to matter in those cases. Am I wrong in what I'm saying? And if I'm not wrong, tell me why I should continue to vote.
So I think that there are a couple of things, right? I mean, I think that, for me, no matter what, you got to participate, right? This is about democracy, and the fact that our democracy, for me in particular, feels like it's holding on by a thread. I think that we're 3 bad federal decisions away from, utter chaos and civil war, right? And I know that's a little fatalistic, but I tell folks,
I don't think it's hyperbolic at all.
Yeah, exactly. It was like we're 3 bad decisions and a hurricane away from our climate event, from all of this falling apart.
Yes.
But what is also happening, right, is that our country is becoming majority-minority. And even though, of course, they're trying to change the rules, they're trying to stack the deck in their favor so that they can maintain and hold power. But what is also true is that we have to fight and hold the line around the fact that I'm not going to continue to have less rights than my grandparents. And what we have to realize is that we have less rights than our grandparents across generations. I have less rights. My children have less rights. My parent, it's generational, the ways in which they're rolling back our rights. But if we're not voting, if we're not participating, if we're not applying pressure, then, then we get lost in the mix. And so even though you're 12, 15% of a district, which is also too, I tell black folks too, they like to say we don't vote. It's not that we don't vote. You've gerrymandered my voice into corners, right? That doesn't allow me to
you can afford to not listen to my concern because I don't have a large enough support group or constituency or people who agree with my opinion for you to give me any of your time. Maxine Cormier talks to me all the time about the fact that that this works both ways, that there are a lot of black politicians who like having 75% black districts because they think that it increases their ability to maintain office. But it does a disservice to the masses of people when the districts are drawn in such a way that we're packed into one district and other districts are allowed to do whatever they please.
Redistricting was painful to say the least, right? I mean, eye-opening, absurd. A couple of words that come to mind. That so there are a couple of funny things about redistricting. One was this idea, and even as I read The Advocate, I get tickled because I feel like they only present one perspective. So like if you look at redistricting and from just the perspective of media and the newspaper, it happened, it was what it needed to be. Folks tried to be thoughtful. There was some tension around racial lines, and that's what happened. And what really happened, though, is that we spent the better part of 2 years, starting with census, saying this isn't going to be this way. We're not going to change the rules. And so I think that it can't happen in a vacuum, right? Like we're fighting at the same time that we're frustrated, and I think that's been the experience of Black folks since the beginning of time. I mean, well, at least 300 years ago. And I think that frustration is also about, like, let's exhaust you to the point that you stop participating. You look away, or that your life is so painful and frustrated that you can't even prioritize voting, much less trying to make it every day. And what I remind folks, it's like somebody is deciding that you're frustrated. Somebody's deciding that your life is painful. Somebody is making policies that exclude your access to opportunity. And so at the same time that the system is shifting and the country is shifting to majority minority, we see the coming in of all these policies to limit our power. And I think but we're in a moment where we have to hold the line. I think we're in a moment where it certainly feels that way. But when we did redistricting, the record reflects all over this state, Black folks, largest historic participation in any redistricting process that the state has ever held. Black folks showed up, Latina folks showed up, API folks showed up, Indigenous folks showed up, and talked about the fact that we need more equity in this process. And then what's even more frustrating and sad was that we actually asked for fairness, and we couldn't get fairness. And you heard terms like continuity of leadership. I vote because I don't want continuity of leadership. Yeah. And and so I do think we're in a hard moment, but I do think that, like, folks have to know that folks are out there fighting, right? We built a beautiful record. We built a record that could not be ignored. We won in every lower court. Up until the point that Supreme Court Justice Alito stayed our case, and it won't be heard till Alabama. So what we've done is join forces with Alabama, and we're going to fight for our second majority minority congressional House seat. And and the record reflects the state didn't even put on a case because they felt like they didn't have to.
I was in the room when the school board did their vote. I was in the room when the Metro Council did their vote. It was the most bully thing I have ever seen.
Absolutely.
They didn't discuss, they didn't debate, they didn't engage. They let people talk. You use the term exhaust themselves. We talked for 2-3 hours, and when everybody had their say, and some people had their say twice.
Right.
They just said, motion for this, second, all those in favor, and it was done.
No, for sure. I mean, that's what happened. I mean,
and then you walk out of the room and you're like, well, what happened?
Yeah. No, I mean, and it happened at the state legislature. It's happening at the congressional level as well. And and I think what is happening is they've drawn a line as well. And I think that, again, this is about fighting. And I think that if no one was fighting, then I'd say, okay, we can talk about why maybe it just doesn't matter, and we just gotta survive. But what I think is also true is that we're fighting and we're winning. It's not like no one's fighting, no one's talking about this, that they're gonna be allowed to just steal my right to elect candidates of choice, your right to elect candidates of choice, the work, like we're suing at every level of government. I'm suing several school boards in the state. I'm suing at the congressional level. We're suing at the state level. And so again, and we're not doing it by ourselves. We're doing it in partnership with ACLU, the Legal Defense Fund, Legal Defense Fund has been amazing. And so I think that it is, we're deferred, not denied, right? Like what we want is on hold until we get this Supreme Court case through. But it is, again, it's deferred, not denied. And what we have to do is stay focused on the opportunities that we have. One, which is we got to keep voting. One of our goals at the Power Coalition is that any district that has a 25 to 30% Black voting population, what 30% allows you to do is, Black folks can't elect a candidate of choice, but what they can do is negotiate what they want because 30% can determine
Absolutely.
which way it goes. And so the idea is, how are we preparing communities to sit at the table and ask for what they want, and to just not say it's a wash because all I'm doing is picking between, this white guy or that white guy. Like, no, you're picking between Medicaid expansion and not Medicaid expansion, right? Like all of these, trying to connect it back to the issues, connect it back to the things that matter to our communities. And so I think, for me, it is a hard moment. It is a pivotal moment in our history. I think the 2024 elections scare me to death. I think it is, we've seen that the other side is willing to go to war for what they want, which is power. And I feel like we can't just keep acting like it's not happening, and we can't not act. We have to act, and we're going to have to continue to act. And it's frustrating, and it is painful, and it is I find myself saying so many of the things that I heard like 60 plus years ago, and it's all the same. And one thing that's changed that folks have to also pay attention to is that they like to say, I mean, Senator Sharon Hewitt was quoted in the newspaper saying that, our issues in 1965 are not the same. We've elected a Black president. We've done this, we've done that. And so
that's what they hang themselves
Yeah,
on.
Exactly. We're post-racial. And I think that nothing more is further from the truth. All the votes around redistricting and fairness and equity, it went along racial lines. They clapped and cheered when they knew that they could overturn the governor's veto. I also want to note that it was the only time in this governor's, in his term, 2 terms, that they were ever able to overturn his veto. And and this is also an issue specific to Black folks. So now when all kinds of other issues were being considered, like we were able to find the will and the way to stop folks from being exclusionary across a whole, plethora of issues. But when it came down to, Black voters having, fair, equitable say, that was the only time that they could overturn his veto.
As Democrats, were we asleep at the wheel while conservatives gained control of the federal courts?
Absolutely.
And with the 64 Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the 65 Voting Rights Act, the 68 vote, it was the courts that were the salvation of Black civil rights movements. Conservatives seem to hone in on that and pick away at the federal court system to the point now that I can't trust that the federal courts will do the right thing anymore. And at some point, you can't just say, look at what they did. You have to say, look at what we didn't do. Yeah. So talk to me about that.
So it's interesting because, there's not one right that I have as a Black woman, you have as a Black man that wasn't given to us by the federal court, whether it was to end slavery or to integrate schools. You can go right to vote. You can go all the way down the line. Every single right that I have that as any other white citizen is because a federal court gave it to us. And so you're right. The federal courts are powerful and necessary. There was this stacking of the court, and it happened on the watch of a Democratic. I mean, this started with, it didn't start with Clinton, but Clinton allowed a lot of space for them to pack courts and do lots of things that were unfortunate. And then it continued. But here's what's interesting, though, is that if you look at the lower federal courts, whether it's the Middle District, the Fifth Circuit, they have actually been thoughtful in some of the things that they've done. Like, they have been really grappling with these issues. And so I tease, it's funny because I said, who knew that a Bush Republican would be softer, gentler than what is now considered a conservative Republican. Right. It's just night and day. And so, and so what I found is that there has been some winning at that level. The problem now is that we've allowed the Supreme Court to be stacked.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what happens at the lower courts if the Supreme Court is ultimately going to do what they want to do. But I tell folks, but that's why we have to keep applying pressure. They're only doing it because they can. Mm-hmm. Nobody's having a conversation about, at some point, there's going to be a question about the validity of the court. What are you, who do you represent? Mm-hmm. Whose values are you playing out on, at the highest court in the land? What does that say? And so I certainly do, blame, the fact that we didn't pay attention to things that we needed to pay attention to. But I also truly believe, right, that we have an opportunity to do. We can't, you can't get distracted by all the things. And your pastor, so I always say this distraction is the work of the devil. I don't have to be distracted by all the things they want us to be distracted by, what mistakes were made then. I got to look forward, and looking forward, we have to fight and apply pressure, because if we don't, then all the things we fear are going to happen. I was talking to the director of the New Georgia Project, one of our sister organizations in Georgia, did a ton of work. They just registered their millionth voter. And, she spent some time in Palestine 2 weeks ago. And she said, they were having elections. They met with, all the folks in Israel. They met with folks in Palestine. And she said, for a sec, she got a glimpse of what America could be, that we could be second-class citizens in every single way, that, we could be fighting for the simplest of things, our land, our property, our right to walk, stand, and breathe in the same air of any other white person. And so, which is basically what the fight between Israel and Palestine is. It's Palestine folk, Palestinians are second-class citizens. And when she said it, it was a gut punch, because it makes sense. I can reason it all the way through. But it's also terrifying that we're not there just yet. And if we don't fight, if we do stand back, if we do watch and wait and say they're going to just do it anyway. I mean, so funny story. So when we were doing the redistricting work around the congressional map, we knew we had the numbers. We knew it could be done. We drew the map 6-7 different ways, sure. Right? And what everyone kept telling us all along the way, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And, and I feel like we ended up on the precipice of realizing a second majority minority district out, 12 hours before it happened. Alito stayed the case. But up until that point, we had done what everyone said couldn't be done in the first place. And we did it. I teased. I was like, we had to drag some folks. we had to just ignore some folks, but we made our way there. And I think that, this idea is that everything is, it's just done and decided. It's not done and decided. I think, one of the things that kept me sane through redistricting, because it was a very, I tell folks, there's nothing worse than sitting in a cold room with cold-hearted people saying the most racist and terrible things, and sitting through there for 31 days, right, of just ridiculousness. I think it was more like 27 days. It was too many, however many days it was. And having to know in my heart that things could be different. That I wake up in the morning and God was still sitting on the throne, and that regardless of what you believe, there is also something. There is something pushing back. There is, I tell folks, there's we act like all of this is happening in a vacuum. It's not. I mean, look at our young people. Our young people are saying, hey, no, this is not what we want. This is, we don't want to inherit a dying planet, which they are regardless, because that's what the previous generations decided, but they're fighting. And I think that it is that spirit about, are we going to allow 3% of the richest people in the world, in the country, but also the world, tell all the rest of us, that we don't matter, that we don't get to decide, that we're going to live in poverty, that we're not going to have paid sick leave, like we're not going to have, gas is $4 a gallon, but the minimum wage is $7.25.
Yeah.
And so again, it's like, I think people have to stop people want to make it about race, and it is in many, many ways, but it's also about class, right? And the myth, right, that as long as you are white, that you can be president, you can be whatever you want to be. And what is real is that they are in the same boat in many ways as many African Americans in this country, because they don't have access to living wages. They don't have paid sick leave. They had to make some hard choices like all the rest of us. But that mentality of like, but I'm white. I'm still white though, and it certainly has its privileges, and so I don't deny that. But the politics don't make sense, and and I think that one of
they vote against their own best interests
all the time, and it is truly,
and you pointed out to them, and they're deniers of the fact that they're voting against their own selfish best interest.
No, for sure. And it's also interesting to me too, because it's like, I would just rather them say it's because I want Black people and other people of color to be, to still be privileged. I want to keep my privilege. But the reality is that you're not as privileged as you could be if you really thought about and put policies in place that really helped your community. And we're only as good as the poorest person in our community, and whatever way that manifests, because it's not just money that makes you poor, right? We're all like, I am because you are, right? Ubuntu, that spirit of Ubuntu. Like, you cannot walk in this world and not think about who else you're connected to, which has always been a problem in Baton Rouge. It's a tale of two cities. It's been a tale of two cities. And what I tell folks is that they act like there's some magical line between North Baton Rouge and South Baton Rouge, like, or there's like a gate, a fence. I don't know. And I was like, and if you stop caring so much about like the Black people in our city, how are you not, degrading the experience of our entire community because you don't care about Black folks? And you can use whatever policy arguments you want. You can use all the excuses that come to mind at every school board meeting, which are really hard to watch. But at the end of the day,
hard to sit through too.
Yeah, there are a couple of things I don't do anymore. I don't sit through school board meetings anymore, and I go to the legislature only when necessary. I used to, I've done policy with Maxine for years, and she has been a great mentor and support. And I've gotten to a place in my life where it is just not healthy for me to be in a space where nobody cares about what I have to say. And so what also a message I think is important for Black folks is that we have to, going back to the parties have proven that they're irrelevant, or at least on the progressive side.
Thank you for saying that.
And it's not. I mean, like I have more data. I have more information and more strategy about how and what ways we're moving Black voters in this state than the party currently does. They have way more money, but that doesn't change the fact that, like, I don't have time to be distracted by their foolishness. What I'm trying to do is create a political home for folks that is bigger than the party, bigger than this moment, right? Like this idea that like a political home doesn't have to just be the party, because if it was just about the party and who gets elected, nobody would vote, because we're out here telling folks to go vote, and it's either your vote is gerrymandered, and so it feels like it doesn't matter, and you can't choose a candidate of choice, or your vote's not gerrymandered, and you have a candidate that's not doing the things they said they were going to do. And so there is much to be desired about the political process in every way. And so I think what we have to do is create our own political home, our own place where we fight, strategize, and work together to get the things that we know we deserve and the things that our taxpayer dollars say we know are available to us. And so I do think that that's one of the places we're moving as the Power Coalition, is that, yes, we're a civic engagement table. Yes, we want to build power. But in order to build power, I can't build it in the current construct, because the current construct has made everyone feel like it doesn't matter. My voice doesn't matter. My vote doesn't matter. They're all corrupt. I mean, we've all heard all the things. And what And what I keep trying to tell Black folks is that it doesn't change the fact that you have agency as a voter. It doesn't change the fact that if we lie down, if we turn our head, if we get too exhausted for the fight, that the fight won't continue. And they wouldn't be fighting this hard if there wasn't anything to take. They wouldn't be. We wouldn't be this conversation wouldn't be as painful as it is if it wasn't because there is something to have and something to take, and we, and again, this is also our legacy as Black folks. You gotta fight. You gotta fight.
Do you keep up with, I know that you had your start with Baton Rouge Area Foundation. Do you keep up with Baton Rouge Area Foundation
I do.
now? There's a new sheriff in town,
Yep.
Mr. Chris Myers. I have had the opportunity to be in his presence 2 or 3 times now. What do you see as someone who used to be a part of the of BRAF, and now you've gone out and formed your own group? What do you see BRAF becoming under this new leadership template? One of the things that I appreciate is the fact that he's reaching out to community groups, grassroots groups, trying to gather information, which is something that the previous regime wasn't always interested in doing. I'll put it that way. So what's your hope? What's your expectation of BRAF? Because BRAF is a major player in this city, without question.
Absolutely.
A major player. Like them, don't like them. You cannot deny the fact that they have an impact on what goes on in this city.
Yeah, I am. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna watch and see. I, certainly have met Chris a couple of times, and I want to have the conversation, right, about where is BRAF, what's his vision, where is he trying to take it. I do. But what I do also understand, because I've been in the machine, right? I mean, and it is a machine, is that, what Power Coalition also came out of this understanding that, yes, foundations have lots of money and they have lots of donors with lots of money. But that in order for there to be change, nobody can do anything about the fact that this is a majority Black city. Nobody can do anything about the fact that if we can organize and bring, the Black community together, that things could be very different in this community. And one of the things that I think one of the things that was always difficult to me is that when folks were like, oh, we want to have a conversation with community, and we would gather, it wasn't my community. It wasn't anybody that,
Absolutely.
I was like, no, there are other stakeholders in our community. It's not just one group of guys. No, there is a whole ecosystem in our community that is white, that is Black, that is Vietnamese down Florida Road. It's Latino and lots of pockets around the city. And so at the end of the day, I feel like we've got to they're going to have to open up. They're going to have to. They're going to have to talk about how and in what ways they want to continue to be a player that is both bridging, right, what's the needs of the community, but then also too playing in the political game, playing in playing in what's the word I want to use? Playing in the direction of our whole city, right? And so I think that it is. If you do that, seeking out the voices and the experiences of other folks in our community, I think that there's certainly much to be learned. And I think that, we'll see. But I think that what I'm not waiting on is I'm not waiting on any institution to change its colors, change its total way of being. What I am doing is just build, the only response to, organized money is organized people. And so and so at the end of the day, it's like they have money and power, and I'm building people power. And I have proven several times that people power has absolute power and can change things in our state.
Does Power Coalition involve itself in education, public education, East Baton Rouge Parish School Board, the St. George movement, things of that sort? Do you all involve yourselves in that kind of effort?
Yeah, I feel like we're involved in a whole bunch of efforts across the state, because it's industry in the river parishes. It is the school board EBR. I mean, the map that is which is also so interesting about how powerful communications and narratives are, because if you read the paper on Sunday, basically what they said was that while this plays out in court, that we're just going to have this map and these elected officials for the next 6 years.
That is correct.
And I said, or 4 years, however long their terms are. And it's like, no. Because once we are successful in court, you're going to change the map, and we're going to hold another election, because that's what the infrastructure decided. That's what the Secretary of State decided. That's what the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board. And so all the folks that don't have resources to hold another election, you have resources for everything else.
Sure.
And so the idea that we're going to allow a map, I mean, like basically a reapportionment that was not reapportioned to just stand for till the next election is absurd to me. And I think but that's also too the power of media, and the power of like who, we're trying to challenge that, like at the end of the day, the map, the Where's Collins, the Collins, Where Collins map, it's out, we provided the demographer that drew that map.
Yes.
We are engaging wherever community brings us in. I mean, on the St. George piece, we've certainly done some advocacy. One of the nice things about, having an organization that does civic engagement is I have a voter file. I'm working with and contacting and moving voters on a regular basis. And so we've built strong relationships and communities across the state. And so we use that tool to then work with communities and churches and neighborhood groups to understand like what's happening in your neighborhood. Like let's go back to the basics, right? And so we involve ourselves in all kinds of things. I mean, we're supporting the Descendants Project and Rise St. James and other groups around the grain elevator in St. James Parish. Or no, it's not St. James. It's it's gonna come to me, but basically the river parishes. We are we are fighting in New Orleans right now around any number of different things, but certainly like trying to figure out how we build a safety net. I mean, we're also getting ready to figure out, even right here in Baton Rouge, like why are we criminalizing homelessness?
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was on my list. The Metro Council, 7-5, Republican, Democrat, white, black, voted to criminalize homelessness and ban tents from being erected on public spaces. I understand that there was some shifting at the 11th hour with regard to what the penalties might be, but essentially they voted to criminalize homelessness. I have a friend who says that this is all a part of the process of gentrification that's taking place within our community, and I'm sure that has something to do with it. We're talking about, according to their estimates, 600 people, a little bit more than 600 people, in a parish of 400,000. When did it become such a huge problem to deal with the needs of 600 people in a parish of 400,000, that it requires this kind of rash action to criminalize homelessness? Yeah,
that's the question. And and with no solution. I mean, so now if there were housing programs, if there were
jobs
beds,
training,
jobs training, and not even jobs training. I don't get me started about that, because one of the things I feel about Baton Rouge is there's so many lessons they need to learn from New Orleans, and I think that instead of them learning, they're just like, well, we don't want tent cities under the interstate, and so let's do this, or we don't, instead of like learning the lessons that New Orleans has learned and continues to learn, I feel like I don't have to fall in a hole if I know there's a hole, and I feel like we are always choosing to fall in a hole, right? And and I think that people don't understand how government works, or the budget. The budget And that, again, if you're not offering solutions, then you can't criminalize something, is what I believe. And then going back to, there's a huge human services, kind of collection of agencies and organizations. And so if, their budgets are, hundreds of thousands, maybe over $1 million, there's a break somewhere in the continuum of care. Mm-hmm. There is also a break in where is our empathy? Where is why has nobody said we want a solution?
They termed it as being a compassionate response to homelessness.
Well, we know there's nothing compassionate
Quotes
about
in the paper
that.
that this is a compassionate response to homelessness.
Well, when you talk to homeless
I got a
folks,
bridge I can sell you.
Yeah, no, exactly. And when you talk to, that's the other thing too, is that, people just decide that they know who homeless people are because of what they see on TV or whatever it is, right? Like that feeds their notion of what it means for someone to be homeless. And what is more true is when you talk to folks that are homeless, one, there are a lot of folks struggling with mental health issues and substance abuse, lots of veterans that are struggling with all three. You've got, you've got single mothers that are trying to make it. And then here's what's even more scary is that in a city of 400,000, you've got the 600, which we know that number's bigger than that. But then you've got thousands of people living in substandard housing that is so terrible that at the end of the day, the mold, all of the things that the disrepair of these homes that they're renting is also contributing to, like, I have a roof over my head sometimes, right? Or I have a roof over my head until it rains. Mm-hmm. And I think that, those are the bigger questions. Like, how do we have, one of the, 600 people, like you said. I mean, there are resources to be able to provide solutions to that. There are strategies that we can use. And so I think that, for the community, I think we just have to figure out what is our response to our city council to this. What's the response? And, and the thing that surprises me, I tell this to people all the time, when I talk to people in community, I never feel like I'm so different, right? Like there's a fringe contingency. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, we want the same things. We want to be safe in our homes. We want our kids to be okay. I always tease, folks because they always want to demonize, like single moms and I was just like, there's no mom I have ever met that doesn't want the same things that I want for my kids and other mothers. Yes, there are, again, cases that have been, really hurtful and terrible in the last 2 years, but also, and people have been in very terrible and unfortunate situations due to COVID, and it has impacted people's mental health. It has impacted people's, like if you were just hanging on before COVID hit and then you lost your job, like what, like there are all these things that I think that, we have to consider. And I think that, if we keep othering people without acknowledging that we need to unpack it and see what's going on, at some point it's you, right? Like at some point, it's like I said, if you didn't care when it was the homeless guy, if you didn't care when it was the single mom, when you didn't care, like at some point it is you. Mm-hmm. At some point we can other and say something's wrong with all these groups of people, but at some point, everybody deals with mental health issues, and if it's not you, it's in your family. Everyone in this state it has to deal with criminalization and worrying about the ways in which it can become a part of your life or the life of someone in your family. There's certain truths, right, about living in this state. And so I think that the idea that if we don't participate, those things get worse. Mm-hmm. We've made them better. But again, we fight for the wins we already got, and we got to fight to keep those and keep fighting to continue to move the needle. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that is what. I don't think that's what God would do. I don't think that's what Jesus would do. I think that it is unfortunate that we're here, but I also feel like we're trying to organize community to say, this is, there are a whole bunch of folks that are paycheck away from finding themselves in a situation, especially in our city. I mean, the math isn't hard. And so the idea that we're not lifting up, we're not screaming out, we're not saying something needs to change, is a little bit worrisome, but there are people that are fighting. I mean, we're organizing with community and other partners like Vote to be able to say, to call the question, what's happening? Like, why are we allowing this to happen? And what is the accountability for the city council around this vote and around criminalizing folks? And there's no compassion in criminalization. There's no compassion in poverty, and like forcing people to live in a never-ending cycle of poverty and criminalization.
You bring up God and Jesus. One of the things that I say quite a lot is that while Christians of every hue say we worship the same God, our perspective of God and Jesus is very different. I make the argument, has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with her, my argument. I make the argument that black folk don't need to be going to white folks' churches because the oppressed cannot be taught properly by the oppressor. I think that the oppressed have been sitting under the oppressor long enough. And when it comes to our theology, when it comes to our understanding of what Jesus would do, I don't think that the oppressor can teach oppressed folk about what Jesus would do to help relieve oppression, because they're sitting in a position of comfort being the oppressor. So you brought up, I don't think this is what Jesus would be pleased with. In your discussions around the state with people of all different walks of life, people who all call themselves Christians, do you find that our view of Christ and the church and the role that the church should play in everyday public affairs and politics and social justice is different depending upon what group you're talking to?
Yeah, it's very different depending on what group I'm talking to. I think that, I think that we do a lot of work with the churches. I depend on the Black church and the Black church infrastructure to do what the church has always done, which is to be a free space, to be a space where Black folks could worship and be, and put their issues, hear their voices reflected back to them. And so it's been a really important part of our infrastructure, and, organizing and bringing all just that community together is its own work, right? And then when you add in the folks that want to help you the way they want to help you versus the folks that are really just trying to make our communities better. I was like, you can't take the same thing. It's like, you can't take the colonizer's approach. Like, at the end of the day, it's like, I'm going to help you, but only in the ways that I want to.
Exactly.
And that's not the same thing as like, you can't determine for me what kind of help I need. I know what kind of help I need, and so I do feel like, like you see that all over the state, and folks justifying some of their decisions, some of the ways that they show up in the world politically, personally, and otherwise, and it is steeped in this. Like that it's about me. It's I, and not we. And we have to get back to we. And we have to, I had to get off of social media yesterday because all these debates about the student loan forgiveness. And there are all these folks, and in particular, evangelicals saying that they don't know how they feel about this, that they have concerns and issues. And somebody made the most powerful point, which was that, so, the prayer, the Lord's Prayer, the prayer that is the major prayer that you learn in the Bible that Jesus taught us, literally talks about debt.
Yes.
I mean, and so it's just like, it's like we have to just stop playing with the word. We got to stop playing with God. And I do feel like we are in a moment where, people that I feel like, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. I do feel like we're in a moment where Black folks are sick and tired of being sick and tired. But we can't just sit in that, of the sick and tired. Like, yeah, I'm sick and tired, and I wake up every day and I do something about it. One of the things we're proud of at Power Coalition is that we give away over $1 million every year to nonprofits, churches, communities across the state to build the infrastructure to say that, like, we don't have to depend on just one type of institution. You don't have to depend on just a foundation or or wherever people seek resources. Like, but there are other ways that we can build community, that we can build power and relationship around how and in what ways we want to change our communities and our state. And so like for me, it's, like it is very hyperbolic, the ways in which religion kind of plays out in our communities. And it's, and it's unfortunate because it feels like, on one hand, it's like, like we've got to do the right thing and live and follow these certain values. But, but everybody who can't do that is being punished somehow or deserves to be punished or less than,
From my perspective, and you have a broader perspective than mine because you talk to a wider spectrum of people than I do. So, and that's why I really value your opinion on this. But from my perspective, they employ Jesus until Jesus no longer suits them. And when Jesus no longer suits them, then all of a sudden, no, we can't. Can I tell you that Jesus was not a capitalist?
Yeah,
Capitalism is antithetical to the gospel of Jesus Christ. We are left trying to fit square pegs into round holes because capitalism isn't going anywhere. It's here. But Jesus was not a capitalist. So you can't employ Jesus to support capitalism when at its essence, Christianity is antithetical to capitalism.
I do not disagree. And I think too that like we have to also, recognize the ways in which, like there are issues that are about securing votes. And so, I'm born and raised Catholic. My daddy has told me that I will die Catholic.
I understand.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it is what it is. And so, but my faith is much broader than just the institution of the church, right? Like I have a relationship with God that is not governed by, anybody's, particular theology. But one of the things that I always find interesting is that when Obama was elected, the priest, which is also why I don't go to that church, he said, some of you voted for Obama and you're going to go to hell. Like, who does that? And I was like, isn't that why Jesus?
Joel Stockstill said essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
And it amazes me that Negroes continue to flock to Bethany after he made that statement.
Well, and I think it speaks to, those statements to me speak to the intent. The intent is to have you to vote a certain way about one issue, and whether, it's them using the issue of abortion to force you to vote one way while they're still taking money from, all kinds of pharmaceutical companies that provide birth control, all the things that they're, that like don't align with kind of some of the Catholic, some of the Catholic, doctrine, so it's like, you just have to kind of open it up and just say like, okay, the church is imperfect. And again, like you got to have your own relationship with God, because if it was just about these institutions, like you struggle, or if it's not about that institution that is feeding you and actually not only feeding you, but feeding your community. I always also say, too, about, like all these missions, and mission work is beautiful. It's important, necessary. But I also struggle with, like, why are we going out of the country when we've got mission work that needs to happen right here in our own community? And we're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to go. Yeah, millions of dollars to go and do that when, but then we won't even speak to our neighbor. We won't, we won't consider the humanity of the 600 people in our community that are unhoused.
Yes.
And have no consideration for, like, everybody's got a story. And it isn't just that they made bad decisions and so therefore they're poor and homeless. No, it is, there is a system in place that either you figure it out and have a couple of lucky breaks, or you continue to fail because the system is set up for you to fail. And so, and so for me, it's that piece too around, like for me that, again, I'm born and raised Catholic, die Catholic, but my identity and my relationship with God is not defined by by them, their buildings, their priests. I love several of them and have good relationships with many of them, but it doesn't define my relationship with God. And I think that that's what people also have to understand, that it's like, I think people are looking for a feeling instead of looking for salvation. Like, and I think that, and it's been groomed. To me, it feels groomed as well. That over time, like what the church was and what the church is, and that nobody questions, questions that. And I do think that, Shiloh has been the same. One of the things I always respect about you is that you were a scholar of the word. That people can say, like that they preach the word. But I think that one of the things that I enjoy is that like you actually spend time with it and understand it, and that there actually is a meaning to being a scholar of the word, and to be able to then share it with others, and that's a gift, and that's an anointing, and so I think that there are like the Black church has been a bedrock for that, the civil rights movement, all of the things, right? And so I just feel like at the end of the day we've got to put ourselves in places where we are being taken care of. We have to put ourselves in places where people are asking us the hard questions, where people are giving us a feeling that all things are possible through Christ. Like where someone is reinforcing that also too, that there is, like you cannot receive without giving. That like you're not gonna magically money's gonna drop in your lap because you said sang one song, said one prayer. It's like, no, this is about a commitment to a relationship with God and living your life in a way where you are doing what Jesus would do, and not and also too, that means having responsibility for your brothers and your sisters in your community. It's about having compassion and and allowing everybody to walk in their own dignity, and to not think their story, to not blame, to not look down upon, but again, to serve, right? And I think that that's something we've gotten away from in these larger kind of church spaces, is like, how are we truly serving those most in need, and not just serving a narrative or serving serving a feeling. Yeah, I need something bigger than that.
According to CBS News, the student loan forgiveness measure that the president enacted is going to cost around $300 billion. According to the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, the TARP relief program cost $475 billion in 2008, translated to 2022 dollars, $653,646,515.42. How is it that Republicans could have been so on board for TARP and so oppositional toward student loan forgiveness?
So, I have a lot to say about this because so even if you look at disaster recovery, you look at any number of different things, like what this country has decided is that they cannot trust people with money, right? Like that they refuse, that government shouldn't be giving people handouts, when indeed all the government does is give businesses handouts way more than they give people handouts. Yes. To be clear. Yes. And I thought it was also funny in the news yesterday that all these Republicans that were saying, oh my God, were the very people that got $900,000 in PPP loans forgiven, and millions of dollars in loans. And so it's okay for you, but it's not okay for the individual. And I think that we have to get away from that. Like, I feel like I've done Katrina, Rita, Gustav, Ike, like all of them, right? And everyone after that, because nobody tells you that once you do disaster recovery, you have to do it for the rest of your life. So, and what I understand is that FEMA is dysfunctional. It doesn't work. And so why wouldn't we do like the child tax credit? Like, this was the first time, well, there were two times during the pandemic where they were giving folks money in hand, right? And so much so that the small business owners were like, "You're giving them too much money because they don't make that much money at my job, and that's why they're not coming back to my job." And it's like, that's not what happened, right? Like what happened is that folks feel like you've been forcing me to get by, and I'm gonna still get by.
Right.
And so, and then that they had to change it and try to change the narrative really quickly. That's how disconnected our elected leaders are at the congressional level from a real everyday person, that they didn't even realize that the amount was more than what people were making in their daily lives. And that's disgusting. That to me is a failing that cannot be ignored. And I think that, one of the things that I have been screaming from the rooftops is that you don't have to pay the billions of dollars you pay for FEMA. I was like, how about you just give people a disaster tax credit? You get it for the first 3 months after following a storm, and money goes straight to your account. If you are in a declared disaster and you live in that parish where it was declared, you get your money. Yes, there are going to be people that don't need it. Set some income requirements. There are ways to do it. But when it came down to PPP, we had no problem moving money. We did it fast. We did it without any. We weren't worried about fraud. The thing that they love to say about disaster.
Right.
We weren't worried about any of these things, and so we
moved all the red tape out of the way
Yep.
so that they could get the money out as quickly as they could.
Right. And so at the end of the day, we know it can be done.
Yes.
We know that they do it when it behooves them. But I think that we've got to get to a place where we demand it. I mean, I think that it is ridiculous that we even have to have a debate about whether or not it's okay to forgive student loans. Like I tell folks, these are numbers on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It's not like there's there is a true $300 billion somewhere, but for the government. But for the government, though, there really are a lot of numbers on some paper.
Yes. I looked it up right after it came out. $300 billion for student loan forgiveness. The federal budget for 2022 is $6 trillion.
Yep.
$6 trillion. $300 billion into $6 trillion is not even 0.5%. It's 0.49%.
Yeah.
And the world is exploding because 0.49% of a $6 trillion budget is going to go towards student loan forgiveness.
Well, and let's be honest too, that there's also some of that's also driven by the fact that black students and black people benefit from this program in a way that felt surprised, felt like, well, we got something right for a change, and I mean, it wasn't perfect what they did, because they should have just forgiven it all. Because again, like you said, that would have been 1%. I mean, 1.5% of the budget.
It's not anything. It's a pimple on an elephant's butt.
Right.
That's what it is.
It's numbers on paper. And I think that, but to give people back their ability to live their lives, to not have their credit destroyed, because we told them that they needed to go get a 4-year degree and they would make so much money and their lives would be better. And that has not been the experience of many Americans in this country. It's crazy to me. But I think also it is also a fundamental failing of government. Like, you have to trust people with money. If my house gets destroyed in a storm, my family needs somewhere to live. So I'm going to spend those resources making sure that my home is restored. And if I do make a bad choice, that's a bad choice that me and my family have to live with. But the government shouldn't be worried about the fraud. The fraud is that our insurance companies are robbing us blind and not doing what's right. Now, we are working all over the state for Ida and all the impacted areas. We saw so many people that had policies that covered wind, but not water.
Right.
That covered, they've carved out every way in which to take advantage of citizens in this state, and our insurance commissioner allows that. Yeah. That'll be on the ballot in 2023. Everybody will be on the ballot in 2023 in this state, and we need to bring it to bear, the failings, right? And pick different people, because it's not okay that the only fraud that I see is that we have insurance companies that are taking advantage of people. We have
and they're leaving the state.
Hey, I was impacted. We had to go find new homeowners insurance. Our company was one of the insurance companies that folded, and in the middle of hurricane season, I was like, woo, we got to take care of this. But it's scary, right? And so when we talk about these things, we have to get back to a PPP, experience for like for everyone, right? Like we got to get, like, basically, like when there's storms, like they happen at the end of the month when people get paid. They have to spend their money on hotels, gas, and food, and then they have to come back and all their bills are still due. All the repairs and things that they have to wait months and months and months for anybody to find the answer, write a check, get a check in hand. And so they're living in substandard housing. They're trying to figure it out. And, and after Ida, it was stark, the difference in how people responded to the storm. People they put tents on their property. They just said, we can't do this anymore the way that it's been done, and more importantly, can't afford to do it that way anymore. And so, and FEMA purposefully doesn't actually bring their troops down for about 2 weeks because they know the people that are impacted need the hotel rooms. But I said, but what does that have to do with, okay, well, then make some decisions and move some money so that people can be whole. And I think that, again, we've demonstrated through PPP as a perfect example, even through the child tax credit. Like, why are we afraid to give people money? But we can give business whatever it wants. We can give individuals that are considered entrepreneurs. We can do all we can do what we want for business, but we just won't apply the same lens to people because we can't be trusted. We're all these narratives that aren't even true, right? And we've also, so many people have bought into those narratives. And so for me, it's like, no, I pay taxes, and I'm not afraid to. I don't have any problem with paying taxes.
I don't either.
And paying my fair share. I have no problem, because what I understand is that whatever is needed for my community, I want my community to have it.
Sure.
And that, again, because of me, there is you, right? Like that, we're all connected. And so I think that this idea that we're not going to ever, raise any taxes at the local, state, or federal level, because that's that's the thing that's destroying our country is ridiculous. Like, the thing that's destroying our country is greed.
Yes.
And greed at the top of the list, and racism, but certainly greed and racism.
Capitalism, which isn't
absolutely
going anywhere.
It's not.
I have spent way more of your time than I intended to. Let me ask one other question, and I'm going to get you out of here. Gun violence prevention. Power Coalition is heavily involved in gun violence prevention. You're running headlong into a buzzsaw because people love their guns. And that's not even a racial issue. Black folk love their guns as much as white folk do. I can't tell you how many people show up here on Sunday morning with guns. They're coming to worship, but they have their guns with them. Some of them have the decency to leave them in the car. But trust me, they've got their guns. We are a nation that loves guns.
Yep.
What do you see going on going forward that might be helpful to deal with the proliferation of gun violence that's taking place within our communities and our state?
Well, there's so many layers, right? Like, I think that, sure, you can have a gun. Do you need an AK-47 though?
Yeah.
Do you need to be able to get off 200 rounds and kill God knows how many people before anybody can do anything about it? So it's like, you can have your pistol, but I don't, but I think that there is a whole group of guns that shouldn't be out in in community and out in our like it's normal. Like, it's not normal. You're not in Iraq. We're not in war. Like, what do you need? What do we need that for? That's one piece. I think the other thing is the part about this that is racial is that regardless of of income, when you're Black and you have a gun, you get criminalized.
You're perceived as a threat. Yes.
Exactly. Or you can be killed, right? Like, we saw, he literally had a gun in his glove compartment, and the police shot him, and his daughter was right behind him in the seat. And I God, please forgive me because I've forgotten his name, or not forgotten it, but it's just not coming to me at the moment. But Philando Castile, and you mean to tell me that, and he had a permit for his gun, and so you can't. So everybody can love their gun, guns, but only if I had the same experience and I have the same rights as anybody else. And so, at the end of the day, how ridiculous is it that everybody says they love their guns, but then they don't, but I can't have one. They can go in the park with an AK-47 on their back, and that's perfectly fine. A black man does it, and, and the police are called and the police respond. Mm-hmm. And so why are we having two different experiences? So that's one, that's one reality, right? The other piece is that, like, nobody questions, like, how so many guns end up in black communities. That, so...
We don't own gun manufacturing companies.
Exactly, exactly. And so...
By the way, we don't own poppy fields either.
Right, exactly.
Just making the point.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the idea that, that we don't question that also is absurd to me. Like, that there isn't there isn't this, it's like the bricks that were dropped off during the summer, what I call the, summer, Freedom Summer, where black folks and allies all said, we need something different in this country. I think, there's some convenient truths about why there's so many guns in our community. And I think that there's also the reality that when you have deep poverty and you have young people that didn't think they were going to live past 19, 20, 21, that is a bad combination, right? When you have folks that live their lives in survival mode, like fight or flight every single day, I think that all of that contributes to the gun violence problem in our community. And I think that we have to think about all of the real answers. Jobs. It's, access to real opportunity to make, to make money and be able to take care of their families. Quality housing, right? Again, I feel like it's just a never-ending cycle of poverty and criminalization, and it destroys the bedrock of black families, destroys the bedrock of any poor family, but It is certainly the experience, of poor black families. And I just feel like, we've got work to do. I think there's an opportunity for us to use our resources, to use our churches, to use our teachers and our coaches that are frontline leaders, looking at and working with our young people, diffusing and giving, folks skill. Gino McLaughlin just joined our team, and he was just talking about the power of yoga. And that, no kids are taught like how to breathe, how to have a toolbox of solutions, right? Like the only answer can't just be fighting. The only answer can't be, getting a gun. But that there are other ways that we can take care of ourselves so that we're not in those spaces, and that we learn that there are many responses to many things, and that gun violence, I don't ever see where it comes up as one of the solutions. But again, certainly people have to protect themselves. But I do, but I do think that there's just a lot of senseless gun violence in our community. And I've been very proud. We've been working with the city. We've had over 100 people canvassing every day of summer since June 1st. And it's made a difference, right? Like the numbers, during the summer, the numbers always go up. And that's statewide. I mean, that's across the country. It's not even just Louisiana, but across the country. And this, and one of the things that the canvas did was ask people what they needed, connected them to resources, whether that be organizations or other supports, and and the numbers were down. And I think that not that was the only thing, but I think it was an important factor in, if you ask people what they need and you give them access to some solutions, that gun violence can be, that's a beginning. Yeah. And I think that there's so much other work that we have to do. But I think it starts with, you have to care about North Baton Rouge. You have to care about the part of our community that is majority black, that folks want to, literally want to secede from. So,
Right.
I mean, we've got South Baton Rouge trying to secede from North Baton Rouge.
Right.
And it's okay, but when North Baton Rouge tried to do that with the airport and the assets in North Baton Rouge, it was shut down. And so, now we're in an endless court battle with St. George. And it's so unfortunate, because I actually live in the part of the city that would be St. George, and I'm moving. I can't. I always tell folks, I said, y'all, if people don't understand government and how it works, you actually have to know how to move money. You actually have to know how to put systems in place. And then for all the folks that say they don't want to pay taxes and they don't want their taxes to go up, a new government in a new city, you're going to have taxes because you don't have garbage. You don't have, you don't have your own maintenance. You don't have anything.
You don't have law enforcement.
Right. You don't have any. Definitely
You don't have a city hall.
Yeah, you don't have city hall. You don't have law
You
enforcement.
don't have emergency services.
Yeah, you don't have anything.
You don't have sewage or water.
Exactly.
The list can go on.
Right.
There's
The
a
list
lot that
does
you don't
go
have.
on. And
Yes.
so how are you going to do that with no money?
No.
I mean, like the asset, and then too, all of the assets that they want also can opt to be a part of the city they're already a part of. And
Right.
so I was like, why would we want to be a broken city instead of being a city with a couple of problems that can be fixed? And so, so I mean, I think that at the end of the day, it's, certainly never lost on me the multitude of work that has to be done by all of us. But I do ask folks, we've got a couple of things. We've got elections coming up in the fall. We've got a U.S. Congressional Senate seat. We have a good bit. All of our House congressional seats are also on the ballot. We also then have judicial races here in Baton Rouge, New Orleans. Shreveport has municipal races in addition to those things. We've got a constitutional amendment, yes on 7, that would, that deals with the slavery clause. We've got, the language is imperfect, but we have to start, like I tell folks, it has been the way of this work from my own experience, very much less historically, that I got to open a window and then I can go open the door for everybody. If we could create some kind of opening, then we can create an opportunity for everybody else. And so I ask folks to vote. I think that one of the things that we've been asking folks to do is that for all of the folks that are running for Congressional Senate, there are a couple of yes or no questions that folks need to ask. Are you going to codify the John Lewis voting rights legislation into law? Will you vote to put it into law? Yes or no? Like it's the fundamental. Like, why are we having these conversations? Because the John Lewis voting rights legislation would absolutely solve every single problem. Not every single. Would solve a lot of problems around the inequity and the lack of fairness that has put us in a situation where our votes feel like they don't matter. And so I think that again, but if we're not asking questions, if we just allowed the congressman in Shreveport just to go back, he was unchallenged. Why do we have unchallenged races?
Yes.
Again, like there are a whole bunch of people I don't want. No continuity of leadership. I was like, we need to re-elect a whole bunch of folks. And the ways in which some of these folks have truly hurt Louisiana and our community is insane. I mean, our whole congressional delegation voted against the infrastructure bill.
Yes.
And, and I always tease, Garrett Graves put money in for hurricane relief, and he still voted against it. But he basically was like, well, but there'll be enough votes for me to get it. And then they are all sitting at a table divvying up the bounty. And it's like, no. How does that work? And at a time when we're the second poorest state in the country, quickly making our way to beating Mississippi in the race to the bottom, and but we don't need infrastructure dollars. That's insane. I mean, I can barely drive through New Orleans without feeling like my axle's going to break.
I live there. I know what a pothole looks like.
Right.
Yes.
And so I just ask folks, you got to vote. You got to participate. We've got to fight for the leadership that we want. 2023 is going to be a critical fight. And it is our goal to make sure that, that they feel the full 42% of, Black and other voters of color in this state. We know they undercounted, so it's probably more like 45, but whatever.
Sure. Sure.
So and if that happens, that we can change our state. We can choose the governor. So, again, like they gerrymandered my way. They may have gerrymandered me out of picking my state senator or House rep, but they cannot gerrymander my voice out of any statewide office. And we are still waiting to have our first Black elected statewide officer. And so there's work to be done. And so we can't give up. The point is to exhaust us. The point is for it to be hard, or to make us feel like nothing we do will matter. But everything we do matters. Your existence is political. You have agency as a voter to fight and change things in your community. It's rough out there right now. But again, I think that there's, our eyes have been opened after COVID about how powerful government can be in solving problems. And we need to demand that every day, not just in the face of a pandemic.
Last question, very last question. You're, in addition to Power Coalition, you're a wife, you're a mother of 3. Your oldest, I believe, is in college now.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask people who are first-time guests on the podcast, do you want your children, I know it's their choice, do you want your children to grow up in Baton Rouge, to make stake their claim in Baton Rouge?
I talk about this all the time because, when you decide to have kids, you take, you think of everything, right? Like I thought about all the worst case scenarios of what I was bringing a child into, what world was I bringing them into, and I think I couldn't even have imagined this scenario. Like I think I imagined some bad things, but like our democracy is holding on by a thread. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I don't know what they're going to inherit from the world, much less in our own community. And I think that, one of the most powerful pieces of testimony during redistricting was a young woman from Dillard, a Dillard student, who said she has no hope for this state, that she's going to get her education and she's going to leave, just like all of the other people, all of her other friends and family in Louisiana, because they will not do the right thing. They will not be fair. They will not be equitable. They will not address systemic racism. I mean, I literally spent most of the last week fighting to make sure that Bessie didn't take out the social and emotional development and learning of children, because the superintendent said it was a Trojan horse for critical race theory. Mm-hmm. First of all, no. What it is that you need to teach children how to be kind, how to talk to each other, how to not make a teacher's job harder, because this kid can just walk around and think they can do whatever they want to do. Like, no, there are rules, and we enforce these rules for all the other things that we want, right? Mm-hmm. Around discipline and uniforms and all this other crap. But they don't have to have manners. They don't have to be decent human beings. They don't have to have integrity and character. It's absurd. It's absurd. And then too, if you think about early child care, there are a lot of folks in early child care that aren't even making a living wage. Yes. And so then you want me to deal with a kid that that we're not actually doing the work of developing socially and emotionally? Insane. And so I say that to say that I don't think my kids can stay. I want to. That's why. Look, let me tell you something. I tell this to everybody, because folks are like, why do you continue to do this? Why are you working so hard? Like, it's impacting your health. It's all these things. And it is true. But I was like, because I do want there to be a chance that they could continue to live in our community. And I'm fighting for it every single day. And not just for them, but for all the babies. And I've shared this story with you. One of the donors that, that I've known in Baton Rouge for a very long time, good friend, when we talk about violence and, or police brutality or any of these things, they were like, well, Ashley, not your son. I was like, does he have a sign? Does he have a sign on his back that says, we like his mom, don't shoot him, don't brutalize him? Or I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, I got to fight for all the little black boys the same. And I was like, and my son is no safer than any other little black boy in this community. And, and he's not so little anymore. He's a sophomore at LSU now, and he is 6'3" and 200 pounds. And, the kid that I love and is silly and, and brilliant is a threat to so many other folks, and in particular folks with guns, mm-hmm. that actually are supposed to serve and protect, but that I literally plead the blood of Jesus over him every single day, because I am not promised that he's going to come back to me every single day. And so I'm fighting for the Baton Rouge that I want. I'm fighting for the Louisiana that I want to live in. I tell people too, everything I love is in this place. That's why I stay. Everything I love. Now, all the stuff around me in the place that I love is messed up, right? And we're just trying to fix it and move the needle on all the systems that have to be changed in order for our young people to decide that maybe, just maybe, they could build a life here. But as it currently stands, no. And in fact, as we watch the federal, the Supreme Court kind of move towards the states' rights piece and giving states more rights. Yes. I don't know if it's a place that I'll be living in for forever. And I never thought I would ever say that I wouldn't be living here. But me and my parents, we're leaving. taking the things that I love, and we're getting out of here. And it's unfortunate because I'm one of 5 kids. We all live here, except for my baby brother who's in Atlanta. And we all live within 15 minutes of each other. My dad and I live 7 minutes from my parents. And I just think, and that's beautiful. Like, it's beautiful for our family. It's beautiful for my kids. And, and to just think that, we may be in a moment in the next 10 years where I have to make a decision like my dad's family's from the Virgin Islands. I was like, Daddy, we might have to get dual citizenship. So we might have to keep our options open, because I won't allow my kids to live in a place where they don't have rights and they're forced to live as second-class citizens. And like I said, and just walk around and walk with that fear. And I don't think people understand how powerful that is trauma, right? Like when you walk around every day hoping that your son comes home to you, that's trauma, right? My grandmother, when the news would come on, Crime Stoppers would be like, we're looking for a black man, 6 foot, 6'2", 200 pounds. And, she would literally call my uncles and say, you need, make sure you're at home, because they're just looking for anybody that fits this description. And, that's insane. That's insane. And that's been 30 years ago.
No,
and it's still the same
reality.
today. Yeah, it's our reality. And so I do, like I said, I'm fighting like hell, and nobody's gonna, take me from what I feel like God has put in my heart to do, which is to know that there are always, miracles happen. The first shall be, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And I'm fighting to make it happen. And so I believe in it. Like I said, and it isn't that I believe in, the leadership of the state, or I'm not waiting on anybody to free me or to give me my rights. I'm fighting for my own rights, right? I was like again, every right I had to get from the federal courts.
I understand.
Yeah, and so the lower courts at least feel like there's some opportunity, but the Supreme Court is very problematic. But hopefully our new justice that was just installed, they said she's a consensus builder, so
yes.
Hopefully she can build some consensus and bring us back to something that resembles sanity.
It has been long overdue having you here. I am so grateful that you chose to come and share, and I hope that you come back, because there are about 5 or 6 other questions that I would love to talk with you.
And we got to unpack some of these constitutional amendments, and
yes.
so we want to make sure that we, that as we keep changing our Constitution on a regular basis, that we're not letting things slide through, like debasing the tax base of New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport, that just so happen to be the majority black cities and have black leadership,
yes. Yes.
So, which was on the ballot last time. And so we have to talk about what all those things mean and understand what we're voting for. And we got to get down the ballot. You can't skip the you can't skip the stuff you don't want to know about. Like, it's all important.
Ashley Kennedy Shelton, thank you so much for coming by and sharing with us. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again next time.